The CEO married the crazy girl. They said Adrian Liu had everything a man could possibly want: a towering empire of glass and steel rising above the city, a name that moved markets with a single whisper, and a face that magazines loved to frame the perfect symbol of calm authority. What they never understood was that Adrian Liu had built his world so carefully that there was no room left in it to breathe. Every hour of his day was scheduled, every relationship measured, every emotion filed away like an unnecessary expense. He believed control was the highest form of intelligence, and for years, control had rewarded him generously. That belief shattered the day he married Lin Xiaoyu. The marriage shocked everyone, but none more than the people who thought they knew Adrian best. His board members whispered behind closed doors, his relatives pretended to smile, while counting the days until the scandal would ruin him, and the media sharpened their pens, eager for blood. Lin Xiaoyu was not what the world expected beside a man like Adrian. She laughed too loudly, spoke without filters, and wore emotions the way other people wore clothes, changing them freely, sometimes clashing, sometimes glowing. Some called her eccentric, others reckless, and many cruelly labeled her crazy. She had a habit of saying exactly what she felt, even if it made people uncomfortable, and she refused to lower her gaze for anyone, not even for the most powerful CEO in the country. Adrian met Xiaoyu by accident on a rainy night when his perfectly arranged life slipped on wet pavement. His driver was late, his phone battery had died, and for the first time in years, he stood alone outside a small convenience store, irritated and soaked. Xiaoyu burst out of the store holding an umbrella with cartoon ducks printed all over it, arguing cheerfully with the cashier about whether rain made chocolate taste better. She noticed Adrian standing there like a statue carved from impatience, and held the umbrella over his head without asking. Water dripped down her sleeve, but she didn't seem to care. She looked at him, really looked at him, and said, "You look like someone who forgot how to smile." No one had ever spoken to Adrian like that. People usually spoke to him with fear, admiration, or calculation. Xiaoyu spoke to him with curiosity, as if he were a puzzle she found interesting but not intimidating. He should have walked away. He should have dismissed her as a nuisance. Instead, he found himself answering her, telling her he didn't have time to smile. She laughed, a bright, unrestrained sound that cut through the rain. "Then you need it more than anyone," she said. That moment planted a seed Adrian didn't recognize until it grew too large to ignore. They met again, and then again, not through social circles or business deals but through coincidence and choice. Xiaoyu never asked who he was or what he owned. She complained about the city traffic, talked about the stray cat she fed near her apartment, and shared her dream of opening a small bookstore cafe where people could read without being judged. Adrian listened, first out of curiosity, then out of something dangerously close to peace. Around her he wasn't Adrian Liu, the CEO. He was just a man who could sit in silence and not feel the need to dominate it. When he decided to marry her, it wasn't a strategic move or a calculated alliance. It was the most irrational decision he had ever made, and that terrified him. The wedding was small, simple, and entirely unlike the lavish ceremonies expected of someone in his position. Xiaoyu wore a plain dress and sneakers, because she wanted to be comfortable. Adrian's mother nearly fainted. His cousins exchanged looks filled with contempt and disbelief. The headlines were merciless. The CEO marries a nobody, the empire's weakest link. Who is the crazy girl who trapped Adrian Liu? Xiaoyu read the comments with a calm smile that confused Adrian. He expected her to be hurt, angry, or at least shaken. Instead, she shrugged and said, "If they can judge me without knowing me, they were never worth knowing." Adrian admired her strength but also feared the storm gathering around them. He knew how cruel the world could be, and he had spent his life mastering its rules. Xiaoyu refused to play by any of them. The mockery didn't stop. At company events, executives whispered when Xiaoyu spoke too freely. At family dinners, relatives tested her patience with thinly veiled insults. They laughed at her lack of polish, at her unfiltered honesty, at the way she sometimes talked to herself when thinking. Adrian watched it all with growing tension, his jaw tightening every time someone underestimated the woman he loved. Xiaoyu noticed, of course. She always noticed things others missed. She would squeeze his hand under the table and whisper, "Don't worry. I'm not broken." What they didn't know was that Xiaoyu saw the world differently, not because she was weak or unstable, but because she refused to numb herself. She felt everything deeply: joy, anger, sadness, hope. And she believed that was a gift, not a flaw. Adrian, who had spent years suppressing his own emotions to survive, found himself learning from her in ways no business book had ever taught him. She taught him how to listen without planning a response, how to admit fear without losing dignity, how to rest without guilt. The breaking point came during the company's annual gala, a night designed to celebrate success and reinforce hierarchy. The ballroom glittered with wealth, every smile rehearsed, every compliment calculated. Xiaoyu stood beside Adrian in a simple dress she loved, unaware that several board members had decided this would be the night they publicly humiliated her. They made jokes disguised as toasts, praising Adrian's achievements while subtly questioning his judgment. One executive laughed and said, "Behind every great man is a woman, but in this case, it seems the woman is unusually creative." The room chuckled. Xiaoyu smiled politely, but Adrian felt something snap inside him. Years of restraint, compromise, and silent endurance collided with a single, unbearable truth: they weren't laughing at her personality, they were attacking her worth. Adrian stood up before anyone could stop him. The room fell silent, stunned by the sudden shift in atmosphere. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm was sharper than any shout. He spoke about respect, about intelligence that couldn't be measured by social etiquette or academic titles. He spoke about courage, about the kind it takes to remain genuine in a world obsessed with masks. Then he looked directly at the men who had mocked his wife, and said words that would echo through the company for years. "If any of you believe my marriage weakens this company, you are free to resign tonight. Because the only real weakness here is mistaking cruelty for humor." The slap wasn't physical, but it landed harder than any hand ever could. Faces went pale, smiles vanished. The power dynamic shifted in an instant. Adrian took Xiaoyu's hand and walked out, leaving behind a room full of people forced to confront their own smallness. After that night, things changed. Some executives left quietly. Others adjusted their behavior, realizing that underestimating Xiaoyu was a costly mistake. Xiaoyu, for her part, remained exactly the same. She didn't become more reserved or more polished. She didn't gloat or seek revenge. She continued to be herself, and that consistency slowly dismantled the lies people had built around her. As time passed, the public narrative shifted. Stories emerged about Xiaoyu's kindness, her intelligence, her quiet influence on Adrian's leadership. Profits rose, not because she controlled strategy, but because she humanized the man at the top. Adrian listened more, pushed less, and led with a balance of strength and empathy that transformed the company culture. Employees felt seen. Innovation flourished. The empire grew stronger, not despite the crazy girl, but because of her. In private moments, Adrian would sometimes ask Xiaoyu if the criticism ever truly hurt her. She would think for a moment and then answer honestly. "It hurts when people try to shrink me, but it hurts more to imagine a life where I shrink myself to make others comfortable." Adrian understood then that her so-called madness was simply freedom, and that freedom had saved him from a life of silent suffocation. Years later, when people spoke about Adrian Lu's success, they often mentioned the turning point, the unexpected marriage that changed everything. Some still called Xiaoyu strange, some still didn't understand her. But no one dared to mock her again. They had seen what happened when they underestimated